Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Insta360 Institute. This is our recurring webinar series where we're hosting different educational sessions to make you as creators into better shooters, editors, and just overall VFX producers. This session is very exciting for us. This is going to be focused on post-production, specifically when it comes to using the Mistika software. And we have our friends from SGO Mistika on the line with us right now. Do you guys want to come on and introduce yourselves and say hello?
Hi, Michael. Hello, everyone. My name is Eva. I'm marketing manager at SGO, and together with me is also Adrian.
Hello, everyone. Glad to be here. I'm a product manager of Mistika Boutique, Mistika expert, and I will show during this presentation a demonstration of Mistika technology for VR.
Awesome. Thank you both. We're so excited to have you here. And of course, I'm Michael Shaboon. I'm the VP of Marketing at Insta360. And I'm just going to be kind of leading you through this session. I'm going to start with some very basic slides on Insta360, and then I'm going to hand it over to Adrian and Eva, who are going to show you guys some really cool stuff with Mistika. So let's get started. This is our basic agenda for today. We're going to give you of course, a quick intro to Insta360 for everybody that's new. This is a really great couple of slides to kind of get you on the same wavelength to introduce Insta360 and some of the core technologies that we're creating. We're going to talk about some general cameras that we produce, what might be the right camera for you and your particular project, and then we'll talk about specific features of our cameras like stabilization and other tips to really get you that smooth footage. And finally, after we get through the production slides, we'll show you a little bit of editing magic in Insta360 Stitcher. We'll talk about how we view those clips then in a headset and other devices. And then again, we'll hand it over to Mistika team, and they'll talk about their software. And then we'll go into Q&A with both of us. You guys have all sent in some phenomenal questions, and we hope to get through as many as we can towards the end of the slide. So please make sure to stay till the end. We also have an exclusive offer that we're going to be sharing with anybody who's attending this webinar today, and we're really excited about it. So let's get started. So Insta360, who are we? As I'm sure many of you might know already, Insta360 is the leading brand for 360-degree cameras worldwide. We have a full suite of products ranging from small, tiny, wearable single lens cameras all the way through to cinematic cameras that capture in 8K and 11K. So really, there's the full range. So for every person out there, there's the right camera, and we'll get through how to select that and the right tools for each job. Insta360 is available in essentially 160 countries. It's again the #1 360-degree camera worldwide. You can see that we're available on every continent, and the reason for this is because of a combination of software, hardware, and how we deliver content back to the end user. We just essentially simplify the workflow. And we have around 100 employees worldwide. We have 3 major offices on 2 major production hubs in Shenzhen, Tokyo, and Los Angeles. We're also opening up an office in the EU for anybody out there. And the really great thing to say here is that 60% of our workforce is R&D. This means that we're constantly putting out new firmware updates. We're improving camera features, camera quality, and this is kind of the main reason why our end users are continuing to purchase Insta360 is that we really care about our products, and this is the most important takeaway from this slide. So I mentioned a couple of cameras on the first couple of slides. The big focus for this session is going to be on our professional cameras, specifically our Pro 2 camera and our Titan camera that we'll get to in the next slide. But what we've created here, the Pro 2 has been in market for approximately 2 years, and this was a huge game changer for everybody that wanted to create high quality VR content, but didn't necessarily have the skill to use individual cameras to create their own rig, and then at the end of the day to stitch cameras. So what we've done here is we've created a holistic all-in-one camera that makes the job easier for you. So the key features of the Pro 2 are things like FarSight live monitoring and FlowState stabilization. And we'll get through why these features are important in the next couple of slides. But at the end of the day, you're not going to get a better camera for the price point in terms of what the Pro 2 can do. And some of the other things that really make the experience better are how you capture content at the capture level with things like FarSight, and then how you deliver the contents later with technologies like we have like CrystalView, and we'll get into those in a second. The Titan does everything that the Pro 2 does except higher resolution. It has 8 micro four thirds camera sensors compared to the 6 on the Pro 2. The larger sensor means you're able to shoot better in low light. It means you're able to capture more data on each of the sensors. We have the ability to now record 10-bit color in something like the Titan. So for your project, when you're thinking about which camera to get, really think about lighting, location, and your resolution deliverable requirements. The Titan is a standalone product because it packs so much power into such a great form factor that we're seeing cinema projects from all around the world now using Titan for ultra high quality deliverables. Now, the key here is that, we mentioned Mistika's on the call. Since 2008, Insta360 has had a phenomenal relationship with SGO, and since then we've enabled a range of other features, including direct importing of motion sensor data from Insta360 Pro 2 and Titan. Now, Adrian and Eva will get into why this is important, but at the end of the day, the goal of Insta360 is to be able to take third-party technologies, integrate them into our ecosystem, and make it easier for you as the end user to use our cameras in partnership with other technologies. And so if you're looking for high-end, customized, great quality stitching and stabilization, then Mistika is the right software for you to use in post. Now we're gonna talk about a couple of tips for smoother post-production here, and this is just the tip of the iceberg. And so this will, I'm sure a lot of you will have additional questions after this, and we'll get through those questions in the following slides. So there's an important tip for how to avoid stitching errors at the capture level. And if you don't avoid those at the capture level, no worries. Stitching softwares like Mistika will come in and clean up the job for you. So the key here is how you rotate the camera and how you place your subject to avoid the stitching lines. So you always want to be aware of this. If you have a person or an object that's going to be hard to stitch out later, make sure that you place them between the camera sensors. Now, in case you do have stitching problems, like I mentioned, and your object is either closer to the camera, you can see here that with the Pro 2 and the Titan, we recommend at least being 3 or 5 feet away from the camera to get the optimal stitch. If you do have something that's closer to the stitch line, you can clean it up in Mistika, and they'll show you how to do it here. The next piece of technology that's been a huge game changer for VR productions is FarSight. Now, this seems like a fairly simple technology. Live monitoring has been around the traditional camera space for many years. But what we have here is essentially the first live monitoring system for a 360 camera. FarSight was introduced with the Pro 2 a couple of years ago at launch. And with FarSight, the goal is that you can ensure that you get the right shot the first time, and that no mistakes are that need to be corrected in post. Before, you were essentially shooting in the dark. You were blind. You were shooting and you were hoping for the best result, and then when you loaded it into your editing software, you saw what you got. But now you have more variables to cover at the capture level. So in addition to monitoring your shoot, another really great feature that we've built into our cameras is called FlowState stabilization. What FlowState stabilization does is it's an internally developed proprietary algorithm by Insta360, and it uses computational stabilization. Now, the advantage of this is that you're not going to need to rent or buy or use a gimbal in your production. The camera is going to do it all for you. Now, there's 2 things that happen at the stabilization level. The camera is collecting data from a 9-axis gyroscope that's built directly into the camera, and it's using that data to run our FlowState stabilization algorithm in post. So there's two things that are happening, and you can see in this clip, which is really amazing, that the top is totally smooth, and you can see the bottom is wobbly, and this is just turning one button on and off with FlowState. The person who's capturing this clip is actually walking. So in addition to your X and Y axes, the FlowState is actually stabilizing at the Z axis and accounting for that bounce. Okay. So, and that's the goal here, right? So the goal is to build in as much hardware as possible to limit post-production challenges. And we're gonna recommend two things here that we've seen commonly occurring in our users. The first thing is to avoid drastic movements up and down, right? So use your 360 camera just like you would a normal camera. Do that kind of bent knee walk that you would with your camera to avoid your Z axis as much as possible. And also you can use a monopod to counterweight and help with overall balance. So there's things you can do to minimize how much you're gonna have to clean up in post. The second thing that we've seen as a common occurrence is high frequency vibrations. Now these are normal in motion shots, things like drones, cars, helicopters. You're gonna notice that because of the way that the vehicle is vibrating, the camera's gonna pick all that up. And so what we recommend is a simple vibration absorption plate that can reduce all of these vibrations. It's a simple fix, and it'll save you a lot of time in post. Now, again, if you do happen to have these high frequency vibrations or the Z-axis stabilization, the Mistika software is going to show you how to remove all this. So once you capture your clips, you're going to need to know about the workflow, right? How do you get your clips from your camera into your computer and properly organized and sorted? And I'm going to show you that it's actually pretty easy. So this is a screenshot of the correct folder structure. You might be overwhelmed with how many files you see, but rest assured, it's actually pretty simple. So what you're seeing in these files is you're seeing 6 origin files. This is from the Pro 2. Now, since the Pro 2 has 6 cameras, each camera is capturing its own file, and you're getting all of this associated data. So this is the gyro data here. This is your project file and a thumbnail of a JPEG. So this comes into your folder. You bring all of this into your computer after. Now, on the right here, once you fully organize your files into your folder, you're going to get 2 sets of files, essentially. So you see these origin files, and you see the LRV, and you see the origin itself. Now, the LRV is a low-res version. It's a proxy that's automatically generated in the camera in order for you to get things like quick preview and playback that make the production process easier. You can also load these all in. These are also built so you can load them automatically into softwares like Premiere and Mistika without having to get the origins first. Now you need all of these together in your folder in order to properly bring it into Stitcher. So make sure that when you're pulling individual files off of your memory cards, that your file structure looks like this, whether you're using the Pro 2 or the Titan. So there's 2 ways to import, right? There's a manual way, the method 1, which is really what I recommend and I use the most. If you purchase a Pro 2 and a Titan, there's an option to also get a USB hub. And this is really helpful so you can connect all of your cards into your camera at the same time without having to pull at a time. This is straightforward. It works just like a USB extension. So you take your cards, you plug them in your computer, you manually transfer all of your files into one folder, similar to how you just saw on the previous slide. Method 2 is another option. So it's a little bit slower, but you can import files via LAN cable. Now, the big advantage to something like this is if you're on the go and you really, or if you're leaving your camera on overnight and it's loading these files in. So there's uses for both. Preferably, I use method 1 the most. And you can see it. So once you open up Insta360 Stitcher, now this is a free software that you can download for anybody that's new, hasn't used this before. You can go to Insta360.com. You can download this by entering your product serial number. It's pretty straightforward. Once you open up Stitcher, if you go to the top left menu, you'll see both methods that I just described, and you can actually select which one you want to use, and you can do it all through the Stitcher. It's a super easy way to manage all of your files. Going into method one a little bit more, once you select import from the last section, you'll see all of your SD card, or your SD or micro SD cards come up as USB devices. Now, this is obviously from a Mac interface. It'll look a little bit different on PC. Have all those files, you can select your root directory from any of the cards, and you can bring those files directly into our Stitcher. So once you click import contents to local drive at the bottom left, all of that content will automatically be imported to your local drive, whether you're bringing it onto another external or you're bringing it onto the root drive of your computer. You can select. And so once you've Mistika will jump in and go through the full stitching process. But once you get through that process, there's a number of different ways that you can play back your ultra high resolution content. And there's a couple of tips and tricks that we want to just quickly highlight before we throw the baton over to the Mistika folks. Now, with Insta360 CrystalView, this is a technology that we've developed a few years ago that'll actually convert your ultra high resolution content into a playable file that you can put onto a regular headset, like an Oculus Go or a Samsung Gear VR. And what happens is our internal software, you'll go back to our stitching software, and there's a convert CrystalView option here at the top left. You'll convert to CrystalView, and this will take your 11K file and it'll convert it from H.264 to H.265. And it'll actually allow you to play back a higher resolution video in a non-high res device. This is our way of maximizing the viewer experience without the HMDs being better quality. Now, there are 8K VR headsets that'll just natively play the 8K back. They're a little bit far and few between right now, but the ones that we're recommending specifically are the Skyworth headsets, the S8000 and the V901. Both of these are super easy to use. They integrate with Insta360, and you can actually use these to live stream in 8K as well. Anybody that's interested in live streaming in 8K, we have another webinar that you can refer to for all this education. So now I'd love to hand it over to Eva and Adrian, and they'll go in and they'll kind of tell you guys more details about the integration between Mistika VR and Insta.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Michael, for the introduction and for this interesting part on Insta360 cameras. I'll just wait so we get, okay. So thank you again for having us. As we mentioned at the beginning, my name is Eva and I am marketing manager at SGO. Together with me today is also Adrian Gonzalez, our product manager of Mistika Boutique. Just before we delve deep into VR post-production workflow, I will just briefly introduce our company for everyone that still doesn't know us. So I bet that at least some of you heard about Mistika VR. So the company that develops this optical flow stitching application is called SGO, and Mistika VR is one of our products. We have many products in the expanding lineup of Mistika technology. Our company is not new to the market. SGO has decades of experience developing and integrating high-end post-production solutions in the media and entertainment industry. As you'll be able to see on our next slide, Mistika technology is being used all over the world by many different production houses, post-production facilities, studios, and broadcasters. So Mistika VR may be a relatively new product, but its foundations go way back. It is built on the high-end Mistika technology with extensive development expertise and knowledge. And as I mentioned before, Mistika VR is an optical flow stitching solution and achieves speeds quicker than real-time for a 4K VR media encoding and stabilizes 360 footage in just one simple click. It is camera agnostic, and in its preset library, you'll find over 40 pre-built presets. So as one of our users, Robert Hernandez, tweeted last week, Mistika VR and Insta360 are like peanut butter and chocolate, a perfect combination. Because of the direct integration of the calibration libraries, Mistika VR works particularly well with Insta360, providing the highest level of precision when stitching Pro 1, 2, and Titan footage. As Michael mentioned before, in Mistika VR, you'll also find Insta360 FlowState integration, and Adrian will show you how it works in just a couple of moments. So many people ask what is the difference between Mistika VR and Mistika Boutique. So the answer is that Mistika VR allows users to stitch and stabilize their content with the professional VR toolset. And Mistika Boutique, on the other hand, offers a much wider spectrum of professional finishing tools, including color grading, conforming, VFX, stereo 3D, VR, and much more. So in today's presentation, you'll learn how to stitch the content in Mistika VR, and then you'll also see how you can do some color correction in Mistika Boutique. So I suggest we jump directly to that. Off to you, Adrian.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to this presentation of Mistika technology. I will show in this during this moment of the presentation Mistika VR and later Mistika Boutique, and how can we manage the integration between both softwares. As Eva said, Mistika VR is a software that is focused on the stitching part. So we are going to use Mistika VR for stitching. 4 shots that I have in here, well, 3 of them because I have one already stitched to show more features of the software, and then we will jump to Mistika Boutique to make the color grading and talk about some aspects of the finishing that can be done in Mistika Boutique for VR projects. So as Mistika said, we manage in Mistika VR in an agnostic way multiple of presets. Basically, we have several ways of making the stitch in Mistika VR. One way is using the embedded metadata, in this case of the Insta360 cameras, or the other way is using presets. I'm going to combine both ways in this presentation. So I'm going to start first with using an internal preset of Mistika VR, and then in another shot I will use the embedded metadata on the clip. So in this particular shot, I have here the Insta360 Pro 2 camera with 6 lenses. So the first thing I'm going to do is to load the preset for this camera. So right click and load preset. And here we have the library of presets that we have. This library is always built with the help of our customers. So when a customer needs a preset for a specific rig or for a specific camera, we develop them for them. So for that reason, we have plenty of presets for multiple cameras. In this particular case, I'm going to go to the Insta360 Pro 2 here, and I just need to be careful with the resolution and choose the right one, and just click on open. When I click on open, basically what the preset does is to put the cameras in the right place in the 360 space. It's not making any adjustments from the geometry perspective, like fixing issues in geometry, etc. It basically put the cameras in the right place. When the camera is really good, like in this case, basically when you put the cameras in the 360 space, you have almost all the job done. But even though you need to fix some small issues here and there to get a perfect stitch. So we're going to see those issues. So the first thing we need to do is to basically lower the softness of the feather area between the cameras, because as you can see, everything looks very blurry. The reason why is because if I open here my overlaps, we see here the different cameras and the transition area between cameras. So we have the camera 6, camera 5, for example, and this area here is the feather area between the cameras. By default, Mistika always use like a big value of feather, because in that way you can see in a really quick way where you may have the problems. So for example, here, if I make zoom in, I can just see that we have a flag in here that basically is moving. So adjustment that can be complicated in some particular cases. Here we have a signal that the geometries are really bad in this particular case, so we need to fix that as well. Okay, so what I'm going to do is to open my overlaps in there. The first thing is just decrease the feather, because I don't need this big value. So go from 76 to, I don't know, something like 25 or something like that. All right. So now we have a smaller feather area between cameras. So we are using more information for each lens, and this information is not affected by anything really. So basically the quality here is always perfect. You don't need to worry about the information that you have in there, only between cameras in the stitch line, right? So in here, as we can see, we still have those problems that we mentioned before. So the first thing I'm going to do is to go to my positions and click improve offsets. This will analyze the cameras between them until they basically match all of them. And we can see that the match is really, really nice. We have that match. We have this one as well. We still have a little bit of double limits, like a blurry, because again, it's the feather area. We will fix that later with the optical flow capabilities of Mistika VR. Another option that I can use is the improve angles. So in that way, we basically rotate the camera until they match as well. So improve the angles, and this will basically try to match those lenses again. Okay, here the thumbnail has been less important, but for example here the signal, we have recovered more detail, so that's always good. Okay, the last step is enable the optical flow. Optical flow technology is a really powerful tool for almost any task. Optical flow has been used for many years in tasks like time warps, motion estimation of movement, etc. So in this particular case, we're using optical flow to generate new pixels to try to match those area here, those feather areas where there is some kind of geometry mismatch. The problem with the optical flow is that if there is a lot of movement or the shot is quite complicated, it can create artifacts. For that reason, we only apply optical flow here in the feather area between cameras, all right? So I'm going to disable the overlaps just to see it better. And if we focus here on the letter there, we can just enable the optical flow, and there we go. We have recovered all the details and everything there. We can even focus on the flag on top of here, and if we move forward or backward, we see that there is no double limits anywhere really. It's keeping the detail of the flag really in a really nice way. So basically, we can say that the shot has been stitched, but we can go further than that. And for example, in this particular case, we can control the stereo of this shot. So I can just go from here to this parameter there, which is right now selected in no stereo, and go to black and white anaglyph. And in this way, we just bring the stereo back to my shot. All right. With a stereo, there is always like a standard way to work, which is basically like try to converge the background, because the problem in 360 is that it's pretty difficult to see at what point in depth you have these objects in the background. So the best thing you can do is try to merge the background. So you basically put all those elements at the same depth, and then control the depth in an artistic way to control the areas that are closer to the viewer. So is what I'm going to do in here in a very interactive way. I'm going to enable my overlays again, and with Shift, I can just drag my image. I need to enable this one as well. I need to select another camera. There we go. And with Shift, I should be able, okay, there we go. I should be able to control the depth map in there, right? So just in a quick way, and just try to convert that background until I get something that basically doesn't have too much depth, right? So this part is already done. Now I can go to this area here, which is in the background as well, and do the same thing. Okay, so in this way, I'm just converging all the background. So now all those elements are basically at the same point in depth, but because they are far from the camera, it's not very, it's not a big deal really, because the elements that are more important are the ones that are closer to the viewer, right? There is something more that we can do in here, which is basically we have a mismatch in the geometry, in the 3D geometry of my shot in here. We take a look, we have some depth mismatch considering the bottom and comparing with the top of the same element. As you can see, it's like changing the depth when we go up in the shot, and that doesn't make any sense, because at the end this particular object, this building, is the same one, so we should keep a similar depth at this point and to this point there. All right, so one thing we can do is first use the jaw balance to try to convert now my shot in here, just to see the difference in a clear way. So with the jaw balance parameter in there, and you're going to decrease this value. Okay, there we go. So now basically we have a converged area here with this building, and if we go on top, we still see this kind of mismatch in geometry. So we can go to the vertical balance and just try to merge it. With just a couple of clicks, it should be enough. All right, so now the whole building has mostly the same depth at that point, which is what we want, right? So now we can say that, okay, the shot is already stitched, and now I can control the depth in a more creative way. So for example, if we want to, I don't know, to move those elements far from the camera or far from the viewer in this case, we can just control the jaw balance and try to move them the other direction. There you go, far from the camera, right? And in that way, we can just control here. We can see that we are controlling the depth in this area here. Now I'm just converging the image at this point. I'm going to leave this with more disparity in this area, just because it can be useful later in Mistika Boutique, all right? So let's say that this is like my right shot is already stitched and the stereo 3D is already done. As you can see, it's really simple. I'm just stopping in every step to explain how it works. But once you know how to use it, it's with just a couple of clicks, you can mostly manage everything, all right? For the next example in here, I'm going to use, instead of using a preset, I'm going to use the embedded metadata of the Insta360 cameras, which is really great to have this metadata embedded in on the files, because we can use it for make the stitch. So even if you don't have a proper preset for that camera, for that setting, you can just make the stitch in the same way. And the way to do it is just go to here to the stitch option and click in Use Insta360 Pro Calibrate. So once I click it, there you go. Now the shot is already stitched. It basically, Mistika with the embedded metadata of the Insta360 camera does the same thing with like we did with the presets. It basically places the cameras in the right position, and then we need to fix those geometry small issues that we can find here and there. So first thing I'm going to do, and we can see that the horizon is not perfectly well aligned. So what I'm going to do is with control, I can just drag the shot and just put the horizon in the right place. So pretty simple. I'm going to move this object here that I have to here, so I have the full view of it, because I think most of my problems are going to be in there. It's pretty uncommon to have problems in the background. So normally where you have problems are in those areas that are closer to the camera, right? So with this setting, I'm going to enable my overlays. And again, remember that the starting feather in Mistika is always very, very high, just to have a full view of what we have. So I'm going to decrease it to 20 or 25. I always move it between 20 and 30. So 20 should be fine. And then I'm going to make the same steps that I did with the other shots. So go to positions, improve the offsets. We are matching the cameras in here. Same thing with the angles. There you go. And finally, we will apply the optical flow. All right. So now we are recovering all that detail that we have in there. In fact, if we enable the 360 view, we can just check in a more detailed way that everything is working correctly. Everything except this part in here. The reason why this is happening is because this guy in there is really close. Well, he's basically managing the camera. So he's really close to it, and he's breaking the minimum distance that you need to keep with the camera to have a good stitch. And fix this is really complicated. It's not, optical flow is not enough, because the disparity between lenses is too big to try to match them. So the only way to work with it is using the edge points that we have in there. I'm going to disable the VR view and enable again my overlay. And I'm going to take the camera 5. The edge points are a really, really powerful tool, especially when you have a camera like this one, like the Insta360 Pro 2, that gives you quite a lot of overlapping area between lenses. So with this camera selected, I can go to the edge point, add an edge point, and see, I can just push my stitch line far from the original position. So in that way, I can isolate the object that is close to the camera to bring the detail back. I can increase the size. So in that way, I can just bring the whole guy in here. There we go. So now we are moving all the optical flow calculations and all the optical flow artifacts that we had to areas that are far from the camera. So in that way, we will keep the detail in those areas, but we will recover the detail here that is close to the camera. In fact, if we enable the 360 view, we see that the detail is already there. So basically, we have recovered the detail of a guy in here in this particular case, but it can be an object or anything that is really, really close to the camera. So we are bringing back all these details, all right? This particular case can be used, for example, in this scenario. Have another shot that I stitched previously, and everything works really well, especially here in the top, which is probably normally a problematic area because it uses like a geometrical forms and you have lines, etc. And those areas can be problematic for optical flow and can create artifacts. It's not the case, but just to show you how accurate can be the optical flow of Mistika VR. But in here, if we move to here, we see that we have some blending between the blending here and this child in there. So the optical flow is generating some artifacts at that point. Well, the functionality should be the same in there. So basically, we can take the camera 5, create an edge point, and just move that stitch line to a more aesthetic area. For example, this wall over there. Because when there is movement, you will have more normally artifacts where you have movement. If you are moving those to an aesthetic area, it's really uncommon to have these kind of problems. So for that reason, I just moving those artifacts to this wall in there because nothing is moving in there. So I will keep that detail in a really nice way. Right. So this is another example of using edge points, even with an object that is not close to the camera. It's because the detail that it has in here is mixing between them because this is originally a stitching area between two cameras, right? So the next thing that you can do here in this particular shot, and that you can do it as well in Mistika VR, is stabilize the shot. We have different options. As we said at the beginning, well, we support the metadata from Insta360. So one way is to go to stabilize and click in import stabilization metadata. And as you can see, basically Mistika is filling here these parameters in there, the yaw, pitch, roll, applying a keyframe based on the metadata of Insta to stabilize the shot. Another way to do it, although it's slower, is just click here in stabilize, and in that way, Mistika will analyze shot by shot, frame by frame, sorry, the shot in order to stabilize it. Normally, using the embedded metadata, you get better results. So that's the reason why I choose in the first place the import stabilization metadata from Insta360. So it's important to mention that there is a specific parameter for the stabilization. So if then you later want to manipulate the shot and change the orientation of the shot, etc., you can just do it using the traditional yaw, pitch, roll parameters in there. So it's not that we are mixing these parameters. So we use ones for stabilizing the shot and another ones for creative purposes. All right. And finally, we have the fourth shot, and this is the Insta360 Titan. In here, I'm going to show a third mode of make the stitch. This camera is extremely important for the VR market in general, in my opinion, because it brings something that no other cameras has, which is basically enough color depth to do a proper color job. And I think that's really important because one of the problems right now in the VR market is that, well, everyone is focused on the geometry, on the stitching, of fixing these kind of problems, which makes sense because at the end is the base of any VR production. But one of the things that in any production, not only VR, in non-VR, like a TV show or commercial or movie or whatever, one of the things that make it look professional is the color. So it's really important to have enough color depth to make a proper color job, all right? So I'm going to use this shot later in Mistika Boutique to use it with the color tools that you have in there to get up a really good result. All right. So the first thing is make the stitch, as we did with the other shots. In this particular case, I'm going to use a third mode, which is basically loading the metadata, the PRG file that you have from Insta in by just dragging and dropping in there. And again, you get the same result. It's just a pure placement of the cameras in the 360 space. As you can see, the feather again is huge, it's 76. I'm going to lower to 20 again, okay, to recover back those details here inside each lens. The geometry here is phenomenal. I mean, we still have some problems there, but once we click here in improve offsets and angles, you see that it's matching really, really well. When the camera is really good, you get this kind of results. I mean, it's quite easy. The problem normally is when the camera is not, or the lenses are not well calibrated, and you have like a very problematic geometric issues there. So it's really important to have a good rig, a good camera, so to have a good result in a really quick way. As you can see, clicking in improve offsets, improve angles, and it just get mostly the stitch done. I will apply the optical flow again just to remove this kind of small double limits that I have in there, which is pretty normal because this is the feather area. But as you can see, the geometry is really nice. So once I have it, optical flow, and there we go. Now my shot is already stitched. Right, so this is the moment for jumping to Mistika Boutique. I will use only this shot in Mistika Boutique. I'm not going to grade all the shots in here. I'm going to use this one as an example, but it's really important to understand that in VR, you really need a non-destructive workflow because render times are normally huge, depending on the length of the shot, because you are using several cameras, you are applying optical flow, you're making your stitch. It's a more complex scenario than in a non-VR production. So if you can reduce the number of renders between softwares, you will speed up quite a lot the production. All right. So the first thing I'm going to do here is to save this. And I'm going to save it. I'm going to call it to Boutique or something that we can recognize now in Mistika Boutique. So I'm going to save it, all right? And I'm going to open Mistika Boutique. So this is our finishing solution. In Mistika Boutique, we have all the options. We have all the tools for VR. We have the color tools. We have effects for make the finishing, for make compositing, editing, etc. It's a huge software. In this particular demonstration, we're going to use it only for grading. But again, it's a huge software in which you can do basically the whole production if you want, all right? You don't need Mistika VR to work if you have Mistika Boutique to work in VR projects, all right? Because Mistika VR, sorry, is included in Mistika Boutique with these two effects, the VR stitch and the VR view. So basically you have the same parameters in Mistika Boutique. So if you are just one freelance that you are making projects by yourself, Mistika Boutique can cover everything, right? So again, the first thing I'm gonna do here is to open the same project that we have saved in Mistika VR. So I'm going to refresh, and there we are. We have here the to Boutique project, all right? So double click. Now it's loading. Can take a few seconds to load it, all right? Because there it needs to load all the cameras and put all the settings and all the parameters, etc. Right? So as you can see in here, if I make this smaller, we have all the cameras in there. Each of these stacks is basically one shot. Okay, so we have one stack is the first shot, the second one, third one, and fourth one, which is basically what we have in Mistika VR. And we are using the raw media that we used in Mistika VR as well. We are not making any transcoding or rendering or anything. And in fact, if we go to the VR stitch, we have all the metadata and all the parameters that we have changed in Mistika VR in here. So in case that we need to change something, we don't need to go back to Mistika VR. We can just continue the job in here and change anything here. Again, you can even start the project in Mistika Boutique and do the same thing that you did in Mistika VR. But normally, Mistika VR, because it's a more focused software, is easier to control, especially for stitching, all right? So let's go to the Insta360 Titan footage in there. And we have the shot, as you can see, with all the geometry and all the stitch done. We're going to make like a really quick color grading. I'm going to go into too much detail of it, but just to show you that you have a full color tool set to manage your VR workflow. So I'm going to, first of all, well, what we can do basically is here is to clean a little bit the timeline by grouping all those shots individually. So I'm going to go to macros, group segments. So in that way, we see my timeline in a cleaner way. So in fact, even if I need to like editing or trim or make anything, I can just move it and do it everything from here. So I can manage that in a really simple way. In here, I'm going to apply a color grade node, which is our color toolset. So I'm going to open my color grade node. And basically what you have in here is a fully professional color toolset used in many TV shows, movies, blockbusters in any industry around the world, but in this case, focused on VR. So basically we have primary controls, secondary controls with quite a lot of options for scopes, etc. Fixed to make like a quick adjustments. We're going to use just basic tools in here to show it, but you have full control of your color using the tools of Mistika Boutique. Okay, so one thing, for example, that we can do is if we take a look in here, we have some values that are above the 100 limit, so the 1023, which is the standard limit. We can just change that to here, right? And I can control that part of the range of my shot without affecting the rest of my image, okay? So first of all, let's contrast a little bit. Just a simple adjustment, there we go. I'm going to create another layer, and I'm going to recover those highlights without affecting the rest of my shot by using the pivots in here. So I can select which area I want to control using this pivot. So I just set in the soft click pivot at 0.8 mostly to just have some softness and recover those values over there. and then with the soft clip, I can just recover them. And as you can see, I'm just affecting those highlights without affecting the rest of the range, which is really, really great, all right? So in that way, I'm recovering those highlights. I can do the same thing with the shadows in there by creating another layer, moving down the pivots in there, and now I'm just going to work with the lower part of my range, and with the lift, oh, sorry, I need to enable this option there. With the lift, I can just recover those shadows. So now I have the range in the legal values in here with nothing out of them, right? I'm going to increase a little bit the saturation. There you go. And now I'm going to create another layer, for example, to change the hue of the shot. By going to this slider, I can just change, for example, the overall hue, maybe move it to a more magenta feeling. I don't know, that's up to you. It's a creative thing at the end. For example, I can see that this tracking here looks very saturated. So what I can do is go to another layer, go to fixed vector, and just decrease the saturation of the yellow, or even select it, or moving maybe to, yeah, to something more like that, and increase maybe like that, so we can see the change. We can go, for example, here to the sky, which it looks pretty cyan for me, so I can just move it to a more bluish look. There you go. So basically, I can make any adjustment that I want with my shot in a really quick way. And the reason why this is important is the fact that at any point, we are basically working with the raw footage at any moment. We are not making any render in any of this process. Basically, we have the raw footage, we have the VR stitch material in here, we're applying the grading on top of it. If we need to sharpen my image because, I don't know, because it looks a bit blurry, we can apply a sharpen, for example, and we have a proper sharpen for VR content by changing the mapping for planar, which is like the normal way, the non-VR mode, to lat long. And in that way, we can just increase the rate. I'm going to increase it quite a lot so you can see it clearly, right? So there you go. Now we have as well a proper sharpen for VR content. And we can just talk about many of those tools and how can we combine them to get a really, really nice result with any VR project. You can always check in the 360 space how this works. Just navigate and see how it's working in a proper viewer. So again, you have the full control of the whole VR production, combining Mistika VR with Mistika Boutique, or just even using Mistika Boutique for the whole process. So this is a quick demonstration of how Mistika technology can help you to manage any VR project.
So now we're going to end with a quick Q&A session. And you guys have all sent in some really great questions, and I just wanted to thank you all for doing that. And I think most of these questions will apply to Adrian, and you are the Mistika master in the room, and we all hope to learn more and more from you. But let me just ask you a couple of questions that came in from our users. So the first one is with regard to, and this is a fairly basic one. I think we're going to have a lot of new users on this webinar that are listening, Adrian. So the first one comes to tripod removal. There was a ton of questions about this. So can you just talk about basic steps to how you remove a tripod?
Mm-hmm. Should I share my screen here?
Yeah, let me give you control again.
Yeah, absolutely. Removing tripod is probably one of the most basic tasks that you need to do in any VR production. So for example, I'm going to use this particular case to show it in a quick way. I'm going to open here my node graph. And with this, I'm using the image with the color grade applied, the sharpen, it doesn't matter really. So what I'm going to do is to use a VR view effect. With the VR view, I can just switch between the different modes of work with VR. We have the lat long, cube, tiny planet, planar, etc. I'm going to use the planar one to isolate the area that I want to fix. In this particular case, the tripod. So I'm going to rotate this to take more information in the shot, and then decrease the focal length, right? So in that way, I have this. All right. So with these shots, with this area selected, what I'm going to do is to clean the tripod there and then integrate it back with my original shot. To do that, I'm going to open a vector paint. And with the vector paint, what I'm going to do is to clone some areas, especially the ones that are close to the shadow in here, in order to fix it. So let me make it even bigger. There we go. And just in a really quick way, of course, spending more time, you can just get better results. but something like that should be enough. And I'm going to make that this brush works in the whole sequence, because the vector paint normally works only one frame. You need to force it to work in the whole sequence. All right. So once I have this image, I'm going to integrate it back with my shot by going back, duplicating this link. Oops, sorry. I'm going to duplicate it again. There you go. And I'm going to integrate it again with the original shot by using another VR view and combining this vector painting here. So basically what this VR view is doing is taking the original shot and applying this patch that we have created in just a few seconds in the image, all right? So I go to the VR view effect, and what I need to do is just click on reverse of previous camera, because I need to basically reverse the adjustment that we did in here to isolate the object. So in that way, I can just reverse the previous camera. I need to refresh the image. So if I go back and there you go. Now the camera, the tripod there is gone. If I move down, everything is gone. And the great thing is keeping all the information for grading, for the sharpen, and even if we force it, from the stereo 3D. So you don't need to make anything if you're working in stereo 3D. Mistika is always saving the metadata there, and it's applying the same stereo 3D of the clone areas in the clean area that you have created by removing the tripod. So this is a way of removing tripod in a really quick way.
That is absolutely incredible and almost wizard-like. I think for folks who were intimidated by the tripod, there you go. You just saw it. 10 seconds and it's gone. And Mistika makes it super easy. So anybody that was worried about it, it's not that hard. The next question is, this one kind of is a broad question. Can you recommend tips for speeding up VR post-production workflow?
All right. Yeah, from the Mistika perspective, I think one of the most important thing is avoiding as many renders as you can. So for that reason, it's much better to probably have a finishing solution with effects and grading and all the stuff integrated in one software. So in that way, you remove the jumps between softwares, in which you always need a render. And another important tip is used a lower resolution for during your work, because for example in Mistika the resolution is dynamic. So as long as you keep your aspect ratio, which is always the same aspect ratio when you're working with VR content, you can just move from a lower resolution to the final delivery resolution, and everything, all the adjustment and all the stuff that you have done in Mistika will be adapted to that new resolution. So you can work at lower resolution in a faster way, and then for the render use the final delivery resolution, and in that way you will speed up the process.
Yeah, it's a great tip, and you know the way Insta helps this is we generate the proxies, so you're not really doing much outside of capturing and then importing into your apps. Insta360 and Mistika are doing it all for you, and from an Insta360 standpoint, you know, again, I would just reiterate, if you follow the tips that we shared earlier in the slides at the production level, it'll also reduce the amount of time you spend in post. So just be very cautious of that. Couple more questions. Oh, this one is with regard to stitching. So what is the best stitching and editing workflow and settings in order to not lose quality?
All right, but again, the best way to manage that is in a non-destructive workflow. We have a specific masterclass using Insta360 Media as well in our channel for advanced VR workflow, in where we talk about it. But basically what we do is every time that you make a render in Mistika, for example, let's say that you need to make the editing in an editing software, in an external editing software. So you need to move from your stitching image to the editing image. To editing software, sorry. So basically, when you make a render from Mistika to create the proxies or anything that you need for the editing, Mistika creates a metadata file that basically contains all the adjustment on all the path to the original media that you use for the stitching. So in that way, you can, for example, make like a quick stitch at the beginning before thinking yet in the editing part. You just make a quick stitch, create some proxies with that quick stitch, make the render for the editing, and when the editor sends you the traditional XML, EDL, or AAF, whatever, you can just conform that EDL or XML using the metadata created by Mistika. So instead of using the proxies to conform, you will use the metadata, which basically, once you conform the file in Mistika, you will see a group like this. And if you go inside the group, you will basically have the VR stitch with all the stitching parameters and all the adjustment that you have done, and the original raw media. So basically, you're not losing any quality at that point. And in that way, you can even work in parallel. So someone can do the stitch and send those files to the editor and continue the job and create new metadata, and you will conform against that new metadata. So in that way, both two operators can work in parallel. So that's a really good way of working in this kind of process.
Super helpful. And if users at home want a little bit of a longer form explanation and some examples, are there additional resources that they can seek on SGO in order to help with this, and where would they find them?
Yeah, they have basically a specific masterclass. I think it's called Advanced VR Workflow. It's a masterclass that was focused especially in this kind of workflow using Insta360 media. And we explain how can they manage using the raw files and create the renders and have that metadata and then conform with that metadata. It can sound a bit complicated explained in that way, but it's really, really simple at the end. If they see that masterclass, they will see that it's really simple, and it speeds up quite a lot the project.
So yeah, just to add in quickly, we have all the tutorials available on our website and also on our YouTube channel. So just search for SGO on YouTube and you'll find all these different playlists. There's a bunch of them oriented to VR, so there is everything related with that.
Awesome. Thank you both. So yeah, use this introductory webinar as kind of a way to get your feet wet and exposed to the software, and just know that there's tons of other resources available outside of this that'll go into more granular questions. And a personal friend of mine, Hugh Ho, is actually a really great Mistika user, and you can also go online to check out his videos, and he has some really insightful information. One more question, Adrian, that came out is, so this is a little bit more advanced, and it's in relation to FlowState. But after the FlowState data has been applied in Mistika, can keyframes be used for orientation? For example, like something in a moving car?
Yeah, absolutely. If we come back to Mistika VR in here, basically when you apply the FlowState solution, in fact, I'm going to apply it again in a quick way to have, there we go, to have all the information. The fact that we use like a specific parameters for that allows us to then later to manipulate and change the orientation using the Joe pitch roll. And those parameters as well can be animated in an independent way. If you need even to change frame by frame the stabilization here to adjust some points where maybe the stabilization is not perfect, you can just change the values in there and automatically Mistika will save that change as a new keyframe, replacing the previous one. So basically you have a specific controls to manipulate the orientation and make your own animation on the shot and the stabilization parameters in there. So the fact that they are independent allows you to manage that in an easier and more manageable way.
That's incredible. I mean, you guys have so many tools available in this software that it makes post-production enjoyable and easy. Last question for you. This one is an important one. We have a lot of stereo users out there who have been trying to navigate the world of 3D and optimize their workflow, and this is a fairly common one. How can we manage 3D in Mistika to avoid the large space between the lenses on Pro 2 and Titan?
Right, so for that question, we have the first shot that we did. I'm going to ungroup it so we see it clearly. Mistika, especially, well, Mistika Boutique and Mistika Ultima has been always very well recognized because of the stereo 3D capabilities. So we have seen some of the stereo 3D functionalities for VR in Mistika VR in here, in the VR stitch effect. But we, in fact, have a proper stereo 3D toolset, an independent stereo 3D toolset in there with more options. So, for example, if we go to the stereo 3D in there and we open the depth map in here to show it, there we go. Basically, what we have here is a representation of the depth of our shot. And if we go to the 3D space in there, one of the most common problems when you have like quite a lot of disparity between cameras is that you get like a huge disparity then between lenses here, between the image. So sometimes it's really difficult to control the depth of the shot, because it should be always in these limits here. This is like the positive parallax, this is the negative parallax, and the range should be inside in there. In this particular case, there is not a problem, but let's say that let's fake the situation, and let's say that we need to control the depth of this area here, which has an important disparity between cameras, and control it manually without affecting the rest of the depth range of the shot. Well, we can do that again using optical flow. Again, as I said, optical flow is a tool that can be used for many, many things. So for example, in here, if we go to the optical flow option there, we have an option called warp. And warp, what it does is basically controlling the depth in an independent way. So for example, if we take a look to here, this is the area that we're going to control. This with the aquarium letter in here, we can just go to the negative split and move this value down. Let's put it in -2 or something like that, all right? So this is like the range that I'm going to control. So I'm going to control everything that is above that kind of limit. And with the negative value, I'm going to decrease it quite a lot so you can see it clearly. I can just put like 0.2 or something like that. And there you go. Now I'm just converging only that part of the shot. I don't need the depth radar to see it. As you can see, if we switch on and off, you will see that we are just controlling that part without affecting the rest of the shot. If I move this value above, like, or well, in this case below, like -5, I will affect other areas. So for example, here, this signal here is less affected by this control. So you can select in a very accurate way the area that you want to control and change that disparity problem and fix that disparity problem in a really nice way. So once you have your stitch and your general stereo done, then you can just jump to these specific tools in the Stereo 3D toolset to fix that kind of issues.
Wow, awesome. Again, to repeat Eva's statement from before, Insta360 and Mistika, it's the perfect marriage between hardware and software. For anybody that just needs basic editing and stitching, you can always use Insta360 tools, but for the most part, there's always going to be some issue that comes up. You're always going to want some sort of customization for high-end commercial jobs, for film jobs. Mistika is the tool to go, and we recommend it to all of our users. I wanted to thank our friends at SGO again so much for jumping on. Adrian and Eva, this has been super insightful. Please, if our users or if our mutual users have additional questions or want to get in touch with you, how do they get in touch and reach out?
They can just send us an email to marketing@sgo.s, and we'll be more than happy to answer any of the questions that they might have.
Awesome. And again, if you want to get in touch with Insta360, you can email us at webinar@insta360.com or marketing@insta360.com to tell us about your exciting projects. And we're always interested to learn about what you're working on and how we can support you. You users have helped build us up, and we want to give back as much as we can. And this is the reason why we're doing these webinars. And we hope these are effective for you. And we're excited for the next one. Please stay tuned. We're going to be having additional webinars rolling out soon, and you'll all be on the list. Again, thanks for coming out. This is Michael Shaboon from Insta360 with our friends at SGO, and we're waving goodbye to you on this one. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.